The porch light analogy is that on Halloween, you go around the neighborhood and sign to go to a house for candy is because the light's on.
Yeah.
The light's not on, you can't go there. That's the same idea with this openness. You need to act in a way that tells your child's birth parent, my porch light's on. If you want to come around, come around. If you can't, I understand. But my light will always be on. If you don't show up for years and years, my light still stays on.
Your dream is to become a mom. My dream is to help you get there. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through domestic adoption and an adoption consultant for over a decade. I'll be your guide, along with other adoption professionals and members of the adoption constellation, walking you step by step down this beautiful and complex path of adopting your baby. When I was going through the adoption process, I had no idea what I was doing, what I needed to know, or more importantly, who to trust. Well, after helping hundreds and hundreds of families grow through the beauty and complexity of adoption, I've learned more than a thing or two, and let me tell you, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. This isn't just another podcast sharing adoption stories, but it's for you if you're genuinely committed to diving in with an open heart, eager to learn everything there is to know about adopting a baby so that you can show up for yourself and your child in the best way possible. This podcast is for you if you're ready to put your newfound knowledge into action. Adoption isn't for the weak of heart, and it certainly isn't done when your baby gets placed in your arms. If that's what you think, I'm afraid you're living in la la land. My promise to you is to keep it real if you promise to keep digging. We'll acknowledge the hard, and we'll also celebrate the joy that is adoption. You ready? Let's do this. Are you ready to unravel the intricate dynamics of adoption where love and responsibility converge into a delicate balance? I'm your host, Rebecca Gruenspan, and today we embark on a profound journey into the heart of adoption's power dynamics with a remarkable advocate and licensed MSW, Kathryn Russell. Have you ever wondered about the hidden complexities behind adoption, where birth and adoptive families navigate a maze of emotions and responsibilities? Joining us is Kathryn Russell, a seasoned adoption social worker with 13 years of invaluable experience. But Kathryn's connection to adoption runs deeper than profession. It's in her blood. Uncovering a familial secret revealed that her grandmother was an adoptee ignited Kathryn's passion for ethical adoption practices and birth parent support. When Kathryn isn't guiding families through the adoption process, you'll find her immersed in renovating a 1912 farmhouse, cherishing precious moments with her two children, or channeling her creativity as an artist. In fact, she did a painting of my puppy for me that I absolutely love. In our conversation today, Kathryn will illuminate the intricate power dynamics that shape the adoption journey, from the pivotal moment of placement to the ongoing relationship between birth and adoptive families. We'll delve into the complexities that define the gatekeeping role and its profound impact on all involved. We'll confront the fears and insecurities that often drive adoptive parents to navigate the gate with caution and the profound emotional journey experienced by birth parents on the other side. Together, we'll explore the transformative potential of understanding trust and continual learning in fostering healthy relationships with the adoptive triad. Kathryn Russell, welcome to the Adoption Roadmap podcast. We are going to dive right in, and I'm going to give you the first question. In the majority of adoption situations you have seen, can you describe a typical hopeful adoptive parent and a typical, and I say those in quotes, birth parent?
Hey, Becca, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So I think when we're talking about what's typical in adoption, that might put some hesitation in people. And I say that because nothing is typical. But when we're trying generalizations that help us guide our practices, we have to. So we're both coming at it from that perspective. We both recognize that there's not any right or wrong experience. Everybody's experience with adoption is so unique. But I will say, when I'm looking at the data from placements that I've done and situations that I've seen, I think it depends what you're looking at to determine what's typical. But I would say what is most often the case for everyone coming to adoption that might be looking to adopt, I would say that there is most often some degree of grief and loss because of infertility.
Absolutely.
Common that someone pursuing adoption has had multiple miscarriages, a really painful, long journey with fertility treatments. For some, that's years and years and years. For some, that's very, very extreme. And for others, it's less extreme or maybe shorter in duration. But I would say by and large, most individuals coming to adoption to adopt have had some experience with infertility. I would say on the opposite side, expectant parents coming to adoption, by and large, most of them did not intend to be pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So for most, this is a unexpected pregnancy. And for, I would say most, it's some version of a crisis. It's often not the only crisis going on for an expectant parent. I've heard it phrased like there's been multiple fires that expectant parents are putting out. So usually it's, maybe homelessness and also raising other children, domestic violence, lack of a support network. One of those things or all of those things or many, many other things. Again, there are certainly women who come to the space to place that don't look like that. However, by and large, I would say that's what's typical.
Yeah, I would agree. So, and you touched upon this a little bit. A lot of them are coming from grief, right? Most, I'd say. So when we talk about this feeling of failure, how do you think that plays a role in adoption?
I would say that there is that feeling of having failed in some way exists for both individuals. It might look very different. I think sometimes we might call it shame or guilt. I think they're all very similar. I think that in our culture, there's the expectation that you, as a woman and as a partnership, really, you get married. The first thing people say is, when are you having kids? If you're a certain age, people always say, are you going to have children? So there's this expectation that as someone of childbearing years, that you will produce children. And so when you can't, for whatever reason, or you have multiple losses, there's often that feeling of, my body's not doing what it's designed to do. And that must say something about me being not good enough or not worthy of carrying a pregnancy and having children. And then larger, maybe even that feeling of, that must mean I'm not meant to be a parent. And that say something about the type of parent I would be. So there's all these really big, complex feelings for people considering adoption that really could all be labeled to some degree as failure. And then I think those feelings often then promote shame, secrecy, guilt, which is not a happy space to exist in. But also for expectant parents, there's those feelings, because for a lot of expectant parents, as we said, they didn't intend for this to happen. They didn't dream of being a birth parent. And so when it happens, there's often that, well, my partner didn't want this, and I don't know how to tell them. This is going to ruin our lives. I wasn't ready. I never wanted to be a parent. What are my parents going to say? They don't want to be the parents with a daughter who's pregnant. I'm not married. I'm not stable. I'm raising other children. How embarrassing. I mean, there's all of these really big negative feelings that come along with finding out you're pregnant when you didn't want to be. And those feelings often, again, look like, I feel like I failed people around me. I failed myself. And that causes shame, guilt, embarrassment. So there's a lot of these really big and negative feelings around the adoption space for everyone that shows up.
This really resonates with me because I often had that feeling that my body failed me. And it's hard to sit with. And even as you were speaking, like, I think I'm over all this stuff, right? I've grieved it all. And every once in a while it comes up. And so as I'm hearing you speak, even, I'm getting pings of, yeah, that feeling of failure just kind of creeps right back in.
Yeah. And I think that's the
So,
note because you're many years past your experience.
yeah.
So for someone who's just entering the adoption space, those feelings are still very raw. I also think that they are not typically explored before entering adoption, which then certainly complicates what we're going to talk about with the power dynamics.
Yeah, and we'll jump right in. I do want to say that if anyone hears snoring in the background, that's Kathryn's little dog Zeus. But we welcome it. So just think of it as white noise behind us.
That's what it feels like for me.
I love it. So, okay, so let's get into this power dynamic, right? Walk me through the power dynamics of a typical adoption journey, like a broad overview.
Yeah. So when we're talking about power in relation to adoption, it's big. It's a big idea and it shows up in a ton of different ways as the process.
Yeah.
I think to look at it simplistically, power is currency. And all of us use to define relationships, to figure out what our responsibilities might be, what our roles might be. And if you think about any relationship you have, somebody has more power in one space versus another. And that's how you get that push and pull that makes a healthy relationship. It's not a bad thing. It can be if it's not equal or if it's dysfunctional, but by and large, power is not a negative thing. It's essential as part of human relationship. So of course, in adoption, we're going to see that as well. I think that the, again, most simple way of looking at it is that when you have a woman coming to adoption who is not sure she wants to parent, and she is carrying the child is at the center of this whole process, and she is the vessel carrying the child. So in nature, she has the power. She is the mother. She is the one that's making decisions for this child. It's her body. So that's the core of what power looks like. The other side of it, why it's complicated, is because you then have a person coming who wants to adopt. And with everything we just said, you can imagine that that's really vulnerable because you've been through all of these experiences to lead you here. And now you are in many ways waiting for this other woman to make a decision about her child that affects you directly. And it's either making you a parent or not. So oftentimes we see then adopting parents have a little bit of urgency or desperation to, I really want to be a parent, so I want this to work. So you have these really nuanced situations that kind of collide and have to figure out how to dance so that everyone's getting their needs met, everyone's being respectful of one another, but it's not easy. It's very complex. One little move by one party disrupts the entire balance of the relationship. It's very sensitive. And everyone's aware of that, whether they talk about it or they are cognitively aware of it or not. The way people act around adoption in this power dynamic, people, again, it's nature, right? It's human nature that we know we have this power dynamics. We're doing it whether we know it or not. And so that's what we see when we're talking about power in adoption relationships.
Well, and I think it even goes deeper, right? And I'm going to ask you for some examples in a minute, but when I think of power, it's not just, between the birth parent and the adoptive parent, but then you have the agency and the entity who is letting this all happen or legally making it happen, and they're holding a power too. And so what that looks like for me is families being too afraid to ask a question that might rub this person in power who holds all the cards in their hands on the one hand. Will they take it away from me or not? And then you have this expectant mom who I don't even know if they understand, which is also a problem.
Yes.
The amount of weight that they're carrying in their hand, not just emotionally, will she parent, will she not? In some ways, I don't know if that's the easier part or not. I don't know. I can't really weigh it out. But then there's this financial thing.
Yep.
She is the one that is between a family potentially losing $10, $20, $30,000, which, by the way, Even if you're a multimillionaire, nobody has that kind of money to flush down the toilet.
Right.
Or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's so many different dynamics going
Yeah.
on here.
Yeah.
And it plays out in various parts during the process, right? So first we have the home study where the agency is holding the power.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have these situations and a match
Mm-hmm.
where the expectant mom is holding the power. And then things switch. Yeah. It is so complex.
Yeah.
And I
And
love that you are talking about this.
I was just going to say that it's not openly discussed. I think everybody
No.
feels it. Certainly that everyone feels that pressure. Everyone feels that, oh no, I'm afraid to do this because then that. Everyone feels it. But, in all the years I've been doing this, I've never heard it laid out like that, the home study provider is in a position of power. And if you want to pass the home study, you have to prove A, B, and C. That very nature of that relationship is dysfunctional power. But that's part of the process. So you have to be able to recognize that and also work through the process. I think too, it's mostly dysfunctional if the home study provider isn't also aware that they are the gatekeeper. They're the gatekeeper for this person to enter the adoption space that they so desperately want to be in. It's just complex. It's all very, very complex.
It is. And it reminds me, when a family of mine matches with an expectant mom, I always advise them that the very first thing they should do is break the ice. Break the ice because she, meaning the expectant mom, is just as nervous as they are. So just put it out there in the open. And in that vein, I wish that the agencies and the home study caseworkers would do the same thing. Hey, listen, I know that it feels like I'm this gatekeeper for you. I am not. I want you to know you can ask me anything or if something doesn't feel right, but that doesn't happen, at least most of the time.
Agree.
It also brought up to me, I know, I had a Black woman who was going through the home study process, and the home study caseworker, I can't even believe this happened, brought up that something about her being too Black, that she would or would not be chosen. I mean, it makes me want to puke. But of course, she is feeling so desperate and so vulnerable. She just has to sit and take it and do what he says because she's already so far through the process that how dare she even roll her eyes at him, right? And that is a perfect example right there of a power dynamic playing out in such a disgusting way.
Yeah.
Have you experienced any, let's switch it around. Have you experienced any surprising or unconventional ways that adoptive families and birth parents have navigated these power dynamics successfully?
Yeah, I think exactly what you said, that calling out, this is what's going on, and we both feel it, really reduces the impact. And that goes for any big, awkward feeling. If you can say, I'm afraid of this, and voice it, so much of the power goes away. So I truly think that the best situations where families and birth families are able to maybe just lower the impact of the power dynamic, or maybe open it up so that they can work inside of that power dynamic, are those where typically a social worker is there to say, hey guys, this is awkward, or this is not typical. Neither of you have been through this before. Right. So okay if you feel weird, it's also okay if you feel pressure or uncomfortable, but let's talk about it so that we can reduce that. Often there are not social workers present in that way, so it then falls on the adopting parent typically to be able to say, hey, this is weird, can we just say that? But I do really, really think that when a person says that, it changes the intensity of the power dynamic in a way that really allows for a little more comfort for everyone. So I would say the best situations are those where families have been vulnerable. They've been not afraid of saying the awkward things. And I think they've done it in empathetic ways. I think empathy in this space goes a really long way. I think recognizing the things we're talking about here, that both parties in this adoption equation are feeling very similar things, maybe for different reasons, but really similar things. Both are afraid, both are concerned they're going to be rejected.
Mm-hmm.
Both are concerned that they're not good enough. They've already felt they've failed someone in their life. And so if you can recognize that you both are coming here from similar paths, that there's a way to say, I see a lot of me in you, and there's a lot of you and me. And so we can find space to connect in that place. I think that also changes how the entire experience goes, and the amount of just struggle, conflict, disequilibrium.
I love that. I see a lot in me and in you. Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. The Adoption Roadmap podcast is sponsored by the Adoption Roadmap Academy, the only online program of its kind for hopeful adoptive parents like you who want step-by-step guidance, preparing for your home study, creating a compelling adoption profile book, choosing the right agencies, and more so that you can bring your baby home sooner. As an adoption consultant and adoptive mom who's been where you are, I'm going to guide you step by step through everything you need to know about the domestic infant adoption journey from home study to finalization. And the great part is you get to do it at your own pace with a supportive community behind you. The Adoption Roadmap Academy is a step-by-step guide to domestic infant adoption for hopeful individuals and families who are sick and tired of waiting forever. It's the first and only self-paced adoption consultant-led program that shows you exactly how to navigate the domestic adoption process from home study to finalization. With our proven 4-step adoption roadmap model, you're going to be able to save time you can't make up, hours and weeks and even months of tedious legwork and research are done for you. You're going to be able to go at your own pace. No matter what else is going on in life, nobody's going to be breathing down your throat. You are going to be able to gain and keep momentum because everything is going to be spoon-fed for you in exactly the way you need. You are going to possibly even save money by knowing how to vet situations and working with the right agencies. It could save you a lot of heartache. You are going to be able to access this course anytime, anywhere, and get expert guidance and support, not only by me, but also by an amazing community who know exactly what you are walking through. Here's what you can expect inside. You'll be getting streaming videos, worksheets, bonus resources, an adoption profile creation, agency contacts, live streams to connect with other people, and unending education, all using our 4-step proprietary adoption roadmap model. Plus, you'll be receiving a bonus mindset step that I highly recommend for everyone. So if you're interested in starting your adoption journey and ready to fast forward and simplify your domestic adoption process, please email the word academy to support@rgadoptionconsulting.com today, and we'll get you started. Even today, and my son is 12 and a half, I still feel that. Mm-hmm. And even though, you know, as we're talking, you would see me as being in the power seat, right? Mm-hmm. I still feel like I have to prove myself to my son's birth mom. So I often won't share the things that I'm struggling with because I want her to see me in a certain way. And I don't want to disappoint her. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. that it still plays out.
Yeah. All these.
And we're close.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's part of it too, is that the stuff is there and there's stuff on her end. For lots of birth parents, even years later, in great open relationships, they say it's like walking on eggshells, because if she says or does something that you don't like or you don't agree with, you can just go away. And in many states, it's legal for you just to cut off contact for whatever reason. And most birth parents know that underneath all of their hope and maybe connection, there's still fear that they could just say one thing that you don't like and you're gone. So it's there for both of you. And I think saying that, especially to the person on the other side of this equation, acknowledging that, like, sometimes I feel like I am afraid to let you see the vulnerable stuff, the raw stuff. I think especially for other moms, they're like, yeah, I know most of the stuff is hard and raw, and we're all just doing the best we can. But I think until you call it out, that sort of moment of, we both have big feelings about this. It's just something people are afraid to do. So I guess from all that I'm saying, make space for those moments where you can say out loud, this is how I'm feeling. How are you feeling? And I think you'll be surprised at how transformative that can be for the connection and for reducing that power dynamic.
That's the best way, right? Just putting it all on the table. And to the other side, I have heard from my son's birth mother, I don't want to call too much because I don't want to step on your toes. And I'm like, no, 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 you can call as much as you want.
Yeah.
You had said something before about how to say things. So let's talk about language. Language is a huge thing in adoption, right? There are words that are really triggering, that are words that are ick and make you like cringe. And so how does that play into it? Talk to me a little bit about adoption language.
Yeah. So I'll tell you something. Many moons ago, when I was working for a larger agency, they had this whole initiative about changing the language within their agency. And, many moons ago, I thought, why are we spending so much time talking about semantics? It's semantics. We're saying the same thing. Now I could just kick myself because there is such a difference in the word choose, because often the way you intend to send a message is not how it lands because of the word you've chosen. So it matters. It matters in all of life, but specifically in this space, it does. I think the biggest layer of language that I think is noteworthy and something people really want to be mindful of, and I think for people listening to your podcast who are thinking about adopting, just getting into it, the most common thing you're going to see is the difference between expectant parent and birth parent. And why does it matter? So an expectant parent is any person who's pregnant, any person who's going to have a child. They're a parent, they're a mother, they are considering adoption. They are exploring their options. Maybe they're even making an adoption plan. But that person is an expectant mom and the only mom until she signs consents that say, I'm relinquishing my rights to this person who will be adopting my child. At that moment and no sooner, becomes that child's birth parent. I think there's also a lot of conversation about whether that individual wants to be called birth parent or something else, natural mother, first mother, whatever that person chooses. But for sake of this, we'll refer to her as birth parent. But there's a big difference. If you're calling a person a birth parent when you're seeking a match, for example, I see this a ton, someone asking, how do I find a birth parent I want to adopt? Good question, because nobody who's making an adoption plan is a birth parent. And if they are a birth parent, their child's already been adopted. So making sure that you're using the right language is huge. Here's another layer of this. If I say that you as a pregnant person are a birth parent, I'm claiming your child. I am making assumptions about the path that your child will be on and the choice that you will make that you've not made yet. That can be a huge turnoff for an expectant mom who feels like, and a lot of women are making plans simultaneously. They're trying to figure out, can I do this? What would it look like if I did this? And they're also figuring out, what will it look like if I placed my child? So when you're telling her birth parent, birth parent, birth parent, what you're telling her is that I own your child. I'm going to be the one adopting your child. So it's really important just to be mindful of that. There's also that layer of what that does to you. If you keep saying this birth parent, it makes your brain think this is my child. And then if this woman decides to parent, you've then complicated your feelings of entitlement over her child, because all along you've been telling your brain, this is my child, this is my child. There is science about that the more you tell your brain something, the more you believe it. So it's super important through the process to be mindful that a person who's pregnant, considering adoption, is an expectant parent. Once she places, she's a birth parent.
I'm such a firm believer in what you say you believe.
Yeah.
I never thought of it in these terms. And you're so right.
I think something else I hear a lot in this space is after placement, she's a birth parent. Yes, she's placed her child. You're parenting her child. She's a birth mom.
Uh-huh.
But when you're talking about her and you're referencing her as our birth mom or my birth mom, she's not your birth mom. She's your child's birth mom. And so I think that also then makes this level of claiming ownership over a person that you can't claim. You can't own another human. So I think that's an important distinction to make. I also think that for people who are in this process listening today, that you're going to hear a lot of things that aren't good to say. Just because other people are saying them doesn't mean that you should as well. So really doing the education to figure out why something that's being said might not be appropriate or best practice is huge. Set the pace for other people. Something I found that if someone around you is using incorrect language, so let's say you and I are talking and you keep referencing this client as a birth parent and she's an expectant parent, I can just keep saying, yes, the expectant parent, right? So I'm re-saying it so that your brain is hearing the difference.
Mm.
Typically people then pick up on, oh, right, yeah, I guess I said the wrong thing. If they don't, absolutely saying, I just want to remind you that she's just an expectant parent is perfectly fine to do and appropriate to do. But yeah, those are, I think that's the biggest language conversation that I think the audience should probably be aware of.
Yeah, I agree. First of all, there's so many examples of language, but I agree. I always take the opportunity to educate, and I'll tell them I'm not judging you. I just wanted to let you know. I just wanted to educate you a little bit, and here's why.
Yeah.
And they usually really appreciate it and say, "Oh, thank you so much."
Yeah.
I was trying to think of where the adoptee came into this with language. And when you come across somebody, which you inevitably will, who asks a question about your child's adoption to you while your child is standing next to you, right? It somehow makes your child's, power be underneath the person who's asking, like they are less than.
Yep.
So language and how you ask and who you ask, all of it is so, so important.
Yeah.
So this expectant mom, birth mom, she's not a birth mom until she signs. Let's move into now you are at the hospital and birth mom has just signed and you want to give her a little gift to say, wow, this is a big moment and I see you and I want to acknowledge you. I always suggest to my families to bring a gift for her after relinquishments are signed, not before. Before you could do like flowers or something.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's what?
Something small and something
small.
Yeah. Like don't bring the whole trunk of your car in gifts, but I think when you're showing up at the hospital, just like I would
appropriate.
I'd bring you flowers or a coffee or some chocolate, just something to say, hey friend, hope that was okay for you. Birth is a hard experience, but yeah, don't go nuts. Don't go nuts.
Yeah. But when she does become birth mom and she does sign, and that is a huge moment for everybody. Yes. What are some of the best, most meaningful gifts that you have seen?
Yeah.
People give.
Yeah, I vividly remember, and this was years ago, and I think this shows how impactful it was because I still can see this moment. I was working with a mom who was parenting another young child, and the couple and their son, their biological son, who were coming to meet her, brought some really beautiful gifts. So they had been speaking on the phone. They knew a little bit about one another, enough that they could really put some thought into what they got her. So they each parent got expectant mom a gift on their own, and then together they got her one, and they were so meaningful. So I remember the one gift was a really beautiful, like a leather bound journal because mom really loved poetry. So obviously that communicates that they were listening. They understood who she was and they really put thought into that. Just her reaction to that. It wasn't just a gift. She felt that so deeply. And for many months after that, referred to how beautiful it was that they gave her that. But then mom had given her the prospective adoptive mom really loved like soft fabrics. She was really like a cozy, like tea and read a book in a nook with a blankie kind of lady. got her, can't remember if it was a robe or a blanket, but it was something with this like really beautiful fuzzy material that was super snuggly. And when she gave it to her, she kind of told her like, this is something that really brings me comfort. And so I hope it brings you comfort as well. And then the dad was a really avid reader, and so was mom. And so he picked out a book that was one of his lifelong favorites that he thought that birth mom that she would really love. And so I thought that was amazing. They also brought, as a side note, they brought a little gift for her son that she was parenting, just so he felt included too. I think the way that they chose to do gifting was so intentional and really reflective that they took time to see her as a human. And I think that the way that went really set the tone for how they related to one another moving forward. So I think by and large, over all the years, all the gifts I've seen, that was clearly the top. That was the top for me.
That's great. I always think that if you get to know an expectant mom and know what she likes and all of that, that personalization is really meaningful. And that doesn't always happen. You may not know much of anything about her. Do you have any suggestions, or have you seen any ones that have stuck out for that situation?
Yes. So we actually created solace gift boxes for this exact reason. So, yeah. So not like you said, not every scenario there's pre-existing relationship or enough so that you would have any clue what she likes or doesn't like. A lot of these situations happen really fast. A lot of situations too, it's like ships passing once you get to the hospital. So there isn't really an opportunity to build something authentic where you could say, oh, I know you love this, so I got you that. So we created this line of gift boxes intentionally for birth parents. They are curated around themes that really represent different niches of what women might like. So one of the boxes is all a spa theme. One of the boxes is all more of a creative theme. It's around the story of the paper crane, which is about hope and healing, but everything in there is for like an artsy kind of gal. And then the light box is all about needing darkness to see light. So, candle, matches, jewelry. So I think when you're sort of surface level getting to know a person, you can kind of identify which one of those categories might be something that she would like. The spa box is great because it's pretty neutral. The products are things like lotion, chapstick, a face kit, things that, generally speaking, any woman would like, especially after she's given birth. So a spa themed solace box would be a great gift. It's prepackaged. It's something you can just grab, take with you, and give her to enjoy. Especially again, if you're not there to really build those relationships, that's an excellent kind of very specific gift. So consider those if you're in that scenario that we mentioned.
Yeah. So let's hear more about solace. And I have gifted my sons, I almost said our birth mom, but she's not mine. I have gifted my son's birth mom a solace box, and I know that she loved them, and they're very reasonable. So talk to me more about solace, why the name, the importance behind it, and maybe some of the stories that you've heard from moms.
Yeah. So a couple years ago, this came off of, again, years of working with expectant parents and seeing them choose placement and seeing how obvious that transition from being front and center to being in the background was. It's fast. It happens almost instantly when she signs consents. And then working with women and seeing them at home after feeling like they vanished from the entire conversation was a really sad and hard thing to kind of share space with. So we decided that there had to be a way to pop in on women after placement and just say, I see you, that you didn't fade away, especially in their motherhood, because after placement for birth moms, there's this journey of, am I a mother? I gave life, I chose adoption. Can I claim that I'm a mother? And they have to really work through what that means individually to them. But that also is kind of work that the whole adoption constellation needs to do. The tone that the adoptive parent sets around whether she's a mom or not to this child is also very important. But the whole work that they do after of just, am I a mom? And if so, how do I share that? It's complex, and lots of women don't feel that they have the right to claim motherhood. And that's sad. because they're always mothers. So our gift boxes are designed to be gifted at any point. I think the most beautiful part of what we do with Solace, and I should say we chose Solace as a name because the word means comfort. It means consolation. It means when you're having a feeling of overwhelming darkness or sadness, that there is hope and light, and you're not alone. So that's why we chose that word. The best part about what we do is that we're a nonprofit, and so we can accept donations, and what we do with those is distribute Solace boxes to women who are nominated on this public nomination form. And I remember one story specifically. A woman received a Solace box. She had no idea she was getting one. She had placed something like 25 years prior. And, someone who knew her nominated her. She gets the box. She calls me. She's sobbing. She says, "Where did this come from? Who gave me?" And she said, I'll never forget it. "I placed 20 some years ago, and this is the first time that anyone has seen me as a mom."
Ah,
That is devastating. Going your whole life feeling like you don't have motherhood, when you do, the reason your child exists is because you have motherhood. But that is not abnormal. I should say that, yes, that story is so moving, and it literally makes me cry every time
me
I
too.
but that's not abnormal. That is the scenario that happens more often than not. So there's really this problem in adoption of this culture around birth parents and pushing them into the dark after placement. So Solace is a way to bring them back into the light.
Yeah, that's a great. I actually love that story because I never really thought about that until now. My son's birth mother is a mother to other children right now. So she probably doesn't feel that. I mean, well, we have an open relationship. We call her mom, but maybe a mom who has other children might not feel that as much as a mom who never had other children or don't yet.
Yeah.
And so that's such an important thing. I know that you are going to give our listeners, if anyone wants a Solace box to gift, a little gift themselves. What do you?
Yes, so we will leave a coupon code for 10% off in the show notes. So if you want to purchase a Solace box for somebody that you know or love, please use the code in the show notes to do that. And I think also be mindful that, again, donations, that's what allows us to see those women that we talked about. So if you're feeling generous and want to support the work that we do, on our website, absoluteloveadoptions.com, there is a donate button that you can help us continue to do this work.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I want to move now into the next kind of phase in this adoption journey, which is a name.
Yes. Oh,
I'm trying to think of the that quote about a name. There's like a
what's in a name?
What?
What's in a name?
Yeah, like what's in a name?
Yeah.
So naming a child, that is such a deeply personal and emotional decision that has impact on everyone in the adoption triad, whether you know it or not, for years and years to come.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what an interesting power dynamic there. So talk to me a little bit more about the meaning of a name. Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Hey there, Adoption Roadmap fam. Are you ready to take the next step on your journey to parenthood? If so, head over to our website and take our quiz. It's called, Are You Ready to Adopt? It's not just about testing your knowledge. It's about making sure you're emotionally and practically prepared for the beautiful, complex journey of adoption. Let's make your dream of parenthood a reality. Go to rgadoptionconsulting.com and take the Are You Ready to Adopt quiz today. That's rgadoptionconsulting.com. The quiz is free, and it will let you know where you are in the process and if you're ready to jump into your adoption journey. Talk to me a little bit more about the meaning of a name.
Yeah. So about a year, well, longer than a year ago, I'd say 2 or 3 years ago, I started working on building a course called A Tale of Two Mothers. And that's really where all of this work around power dynamics and how we nurture equilibrium. That's where that came from. And surprisingly to me, that work led to a lot of conversation around naming. For all of the years I've been doing this, this was not a topic that I ever heard talked about. And what started me on the path of figuring out, how do we have conversations about naming in a way that's productive and in a way that nurtures the child at the center of it, when it's so difficult because of all the power dynamics we talked about already.
Mm-hmm.
This conversation came about because I was in a training once, and it was another professional giving a training to a bunch of clients, and these were all people waiting to adopt. And one of them said, "What do you do about naming? How do you do this?" And the instructions they were given were, "Don't talk about it." And my brain imploded because, as a social worker and as an adoption social worker, I thought, wait a minute, that no, just none of that, please. And so I really did a lot of work to figure out why naming was so important and what we could do to have conversations so that the child at the center felt that they were being named in a way that was reflective of the fact that they have two families and that they always will. I believe that for an adopted person, the family that they came from, their biological family, has set them on the path that they're on. That's how they got to be in the world, because they have a biological family. That's also their physical composition comes from their biological families. So no matter what you do, you are always tied to this family in some way. You are then raised by a person who adopts you, who nurtures you, who gives you all of the education you need about how to live in the world, helps you define your personality, helps you learn right from wrong. They are nurturing your soul. So you are also then intimately tied to this family. And a lot of the power dynamic within adoption comes from that space of someone wanting that adopted person to pick. You either have to identify with your birth family or your adoptive family, because if you have one over the other, then that can't be. You can only pick one. And that's where a lot of the struggle comes from. So we see that in behavior, but we were also seeing that start from the naming process. So what I'm seeing happen most is that families are told birth mom will pick a name for the child. She'll put that on the original birth certificate, and then you can change it when you adopt. And at finalization, you put a name on the birth certificate, which is true. This is the process. However, just because that's the legal process does not mean that that's what's right. So when we're talking about naming, I think the very reason we name is something that we have to think about. We name so that we can claim our children. We name so we can claim ownership into a tribe, into a community. There's a lot of implications for families, right? We share last names because we belong. You were named after your great great grandfather because that we're honoring history. Perhaps it's in some cultures. There's some cultures, they name children certain things based on the order that they were born in. Some it's their name describes the kind of day they were born on. Some have two names because they have the last name of their mother and their father. So culturally around the world, we do this. We use naming as a way to say we belong together. So in adoption, again, that adopted person at the center belongs to two families, and that's fine. It's okay. Accepting that and then giving the child the opportunity to have those two stories be one in name is so honest. Adopted people speak about this all the time. Don't take it from me. I am not an adopted person. Please do go to adopted people who talk about the impact that their name has on their identity, specifically those whose names were changed without their permission when they were infants. There's a lot of adoptees who grow up and take their name back because it matters. So I think that the importance here is to say, if you want to have equilibrium in this power dynamic, please have conversations about what that child's name will be. Inside of the course, I mentioned A Tale of Two Mothers. We talk about this a lot. There's some activities that help you figure out why maybe you're so attached to a name that you want your child to have, how you can work through that to make space for your child to have another name. And then there's a blog on our website called What's in a Name that gives some ideas for how you can collaboratively some names. I've heard some great stories. Some of those look like the adoptive family coming up with a list of names that they like, giving it to birth mom and saying, which names do you like? Therefore, they all can kind of agree. So there's lots of ways to do it, but please do it. Don't avoid having those conversations.
Well, that's interesting because that's a whole nother place where power really comes in because, and I wish more professionals would just bring that up and have the conversation together ahead of time, because a hopeful parent is so scared of sharing the names that they are interested in fear that if she doesn't like it, she's not going to choose them or she's going to disrupt. And, I don't know. I've never actually talked about how an expectant mom was feeling about that, but she's in the power seat at that moment, right?
A story came to mind as you were talking, Becca. I think that the way expectant parents feel about the naming is so interesting because I've had expectant parents who have said, that's okay, I don't want a name. The adoptive family can do it. And then as they work through pregnancy, they say, never mind, I'm naming the child. And if they don't like it, they're not going to adopt my child. So I've seen that type of power shifts. I've also seen where birth parents have named the child. They've had a name the entire time they were pregnant. Maybe they didn't say anything. And then we get to placement and we realize that the name that they may have agreed on, birth family has a different feeling about that. There was one scenario in particular where they named their baby the whole time. We got to placement. They talked about it. And then they realized that the name that birth mom named her child was not the name she wanted them to retain. She wanted them to retain the middle name. So I was there, thankfully, to help support some of those conversations. And then now the name that she has is the name that they both kind of curated together. But it changes a lot. I think as pregnancy goes, it can change the day of, like that story I just said. So I think what you said about having someone there to help start those conversations also needs to say, continue having those conversations as it gets closer. So if somebody changes their mind about what they want to do, there's space to talk about it.
Yeah. And think about how beautiful it will be when your child gets older and you can say, your birth mom and I came up with your name together.
Right?
This was really important to me. This was really important to her. This is why, look, you are a combination of both of these families.
Yeah.
What a powerful, beautiful story, rather than you were named this at birth by your birth mom and then we changed it.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
Which is a slap in the face to her.
Yeah, it is. Yes. And it's so clearly telling your child that you don't want them to be claimed by their birth family in name, that you wanted to do that. It's territorial, it's ownership, it's not collaborative, and it's not a great place for your child to start their life. Again, feeling like they can't just be who they were at birth. They were named at birth. They had an identity. Even if it was just for a moment, they had an identity. And if you change that, it's like you didn't support that initial identity. Am I right? Like, am I making sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot more powerful than you would think. I mean, everyone thinks, oh, it's no big deal and I'll just change it and all that things, but it is a big deal. Yes. And it's a big deal to your child, if not now, when they get older and they learn the history of who they are and who they were, who they are now, their whole story. So the next process, she's given birth, you've given her this beautiful solace gift box, and you've named your child together. And now you talk about future plans with what is called a post-adoption contact agreement, sometimes referred to by professionals as PACA. It's like a promissory note, in my opinion, from the adoptive parent to the birth parent, although it should be agreed upon, but about the level of communication and how that's going to look from here on out at a minimum.
Yeah.
Right. So this is what we are agreeing to at a minimum, and everybody has this understanding. So Talk to me about a PACA, and have you seen examples of when they work well and when they haven't worked well? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, I love these. I love the post-adoption contact agreements because without them, the birth parent has nothing. She has nothing to tell her this is what she will have in terms of access to her child. Verbal agreements are great, but it's very easy then to get home and say, well, what did they say? I think also then for birth parents to feel like they told me they would do this and they didn't. There's no way to verify that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think even in states where these agreements are not court enforceable, we should say that in some states they are. Pennsylvania is one of them. In many states, they are not. So that's where it becomes just like, I promise I'll do this, but it has no, it's not a guarantee. And birth parents know that. And this is a sticking point for a lot of birth parents who were given these and then the family did exactly not what was on that form. But I think what it does is it creates space where you have to have these conversations. What goes in these statements is, I agree to send you photos in this way, this often. I agree to schedule an annual visit around this time. This is where we'll do it. This is how we'll pay for it. So these things are outlined in your post-adoption contact agreement. So if they're in there, you've had to have these conversations about it. So I think in that way, they're super important to have.
And whether it's direct with her or through the caseworker.
Yes, absolutely. I think that there are options to say we're going to have contact through the caseworker, through the agency. And I think for some scenarios, that's needed. There are scenarios where there's safety concerns. By and large, in private adoption, that's not the case. So when you're thinking about this, I urge you to very deeply consider whether you're putting up a boundary that is protecting your health of your family in terms of these are things that we can commit to. Yes, I can commit to an annual visit. No, I cannot commit to two. That's a boundary. A barrier would be, you can only talk to me in this way, and that's it. And there's no reason for it. It's just because you're afraid. You're afraid that if she has your phone number, she's going to stalk you and come take the baby out of your house. That doesn't happen. So we have to figure out when we're looking at these agreements, whether we're setting these boundaries inside this agreement because it's a boundary and we need it and it's good and healthy, or it's a barrier and we don't need it and it's coming because we're afraid. So working through that before you get to the post-adoption contact agreement is super important. And then making sure that in that agreement, you are only committing to things you know you can do. But it's the minimum. The expectation is you establish that I will do no less than this for you forever. But I also would love to see more grow. And if we decide 2 visits can happen, then great, let's do 2 visits. If we decide maybe in a year from now, I was afraid to give you my phone number, but a year from now, I feel like we're much safer. I feel like I know you. I feel competent as a parent. And now I feel like I have more space for relationship. Great, here's my phone number. That stuff won't be put in your PACA, but that's the mentality you need to go into the PACA with. Please do these. Even if your state doesn't enforce them, do it. It gives mom a little bit of reassurance that you'll do what you say you will, but also know that no matter what you put on that form, she still is going to have that feeling that you don't have to do it. The amount of PACAs that have been challenged in a court system and a birth parent actually won, I can't even tell you about any. I'm sure it's happened, but I can't tell you about any, haven't heard about any, which means if the family signs the statement saying, I will do this, then they don't. The birth parent has to hire an attorney, go to court, get these needs met. Most people can't do that. So for her, this paper it's an I promise you I will. She needs it. She needs it to feel reassured, but also know that it's also not legally binding, and that's terrifying for her.
Just be a person of integrity.
Yeah.
Be the person she thinks she has chosen.
Yeah.
And keep your word.
And if you can't, don't put it in the agreement.
100%. In one of your blogs, you gave an analogy of a porch light, signifying hope and commitment. Can you share what you mean by that?
Yeah. So we talk about openness, and with these post agreements, I think this comes up perfectly. We talk about the idea that in every scenario, you can't have openness and relationship. That doesn't always work out. For some people, it's because they can't, the birth family can't do it for whatever reason, emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, whatever. They can't have openness. But the idea that the place that they are when they place their child for adoption is where they'll be forever is incorrect. And we have to make space that the person that we meet at placement has a whole life ahead of them and will change over the course of that life. And so will we. And the child at the center of this needs us to keep space open so that that person can be involved in their life in whatever way they can. Again, typically in private adoption, safety is not a huge concern. By and large, people choosing private adoption are not hurting their children, neglecting their children. They're not placing because they couldn't care for their child. We have to get past that to then be able to say, this person is typically someone who you can safely allow into your life. The porch light analogy is that on Halloween, you go around the neighborhood and sign to go to a house for candy is because the light's on.
Yeah.
The light's not on, you can't go there. That's the same idea with this openness. You need to act in a way that tells your child's birth parent, my porch light's on. If you want to come around, come around. If you can't, I understand. But my light will always be on. If you don't show up for years and years, my light still stays on. That's what I think the spirit of openness and the spirit of that post-adoption contact agreement, that's what I believe it is.
I love that so much. What a beautiful analogy. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I want to end with a tip or a strategy for adoptive families to maintain a healthy balance between the birth family and them and their child.
Yeah. So I think we should say that the relationship at first, because we're talking about with an infant and typically in private adoption, the relationship is between adults at first. It's a relationship for the sake of a child, but it is between adults. At some point in your child's life, they will be taking over this relationship. So you're kind of the steward of this until they can and want to take it from you. So whatever you do prior to your child taking ownership of that really impacts the ease with which they can take over. And if you want your child to have ease in that space, you got to do the work to create a good, equal relationship beforehand. I think that we talked about before communication. Communication is so important. It is so important. Just because you said it once 5 years ago doesn't mean she still knows that. Mm-hmm. So if you're saying my porch light's on and you said it 5 years ago, maybe say it again this year. Mm-hmm. These are things that need to be reiterated. I think also that we really need to do the work before choosing adoption to work through our own stuff. And I think we all,
amen, along
the way to figure out what's your stuff before you put it on the adoption relationship. So let's say your child one day calls his birth mom, and that triggers you. That makes you feel like, but I'm the mom, and you feel like you're really defensive. Take a moment to step back, hold that feeling, deal with whatever that day is, and then take time to come back to that and say, why did I feel that? Is that serving me? Is that serving my child? What can I do to work through that so that I'm not projecting that back onto the relationship? I honestly think if you can do that, the amount of extra stuff that your child ends up carrying, so much less, and it makes space for a healthy, equal relationship for them and their birth family, and ultimately for you. Statistics do say that open relationships are better and more fulfilling for adoptive parents. They make adoptive parents feel closer to their children than closed ones. So,
interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
I think, I'd never thought of that. I think that's definitely true.
Yeah.
Wow. You have shed so much light. This is one of my favorite conversations, and a conversation I didn't even realize needed to be had until you brought it to me. And tell people a little bit more about your course, and how they can find that, which I will also post in the show notes. But if this resonates with you and you're like, oh my God, I need to know more, how can they do that?
Yeah. So we require all of our home study families to take this course because I want this to be the first information that families get. I really think changing the way that a person feels about themselves in relation to adoption and in relation to parenthood is so important to understand before you then make space for adoption and another mom to come into your life forever. So we created this course, A Tale of Two Mothers. It's all about these power dynamics between birth and adoptive families. It's an online course, self-paced. It's $99. So you can go online at two-mothers.absoluteloveadoptions.com. We'll put that in the notes. Get yourself the course. It comes with a really great workbook. The goal really being that it feels kind of like a one-on-one with a social worker, where you're really getting the time to work through, where do my feelings about this come from? How do I break them down? And then how do I rebuild them in a way that's nutritive to adoption? And it's the data with our own clients who have taken this is massively optimistic. We're feeling really, really positive that we've figured out kind of the key to making space for really healthy adoptions in the long run. And I think a lot of this power struggle stuff we talked about, the frequency that it happens is so low when people take this course compared to clients that I had seen for, the 10 years prior. So
this is awesome. I think, you're spot on. This is so important and so reasonable. I actually think, I know we're an affiliate because I believe in it so much. So I'll share my affiliate link in the notes. That's awesome. I'd like to end with some just quick top of mind answers. Who is a person that has been, or an organization that has really positively influenced who you are in adoption?
I honestly think a lot changed for me when I read Ann Fessler's book. And I think about her stories often, and I think about the experience of exploring that profound loss of being forced to relinquish a child. And I think that may be because I, again, found out that my grandmother was one of those children who was relinquished by her mother against her will. And that's really what Ann Fessler's book is about. And all of this work came after I read that. So I think Ann Fessler and her work has been really transformative for me.
Do you know the name of the book?
The Girls Who Went Away.
Okay. In your opinion, what's the most important personality trait or strength that someone would need in order to work in adoption and be successful?
To work in adoption.
Yes.
I think adoption makes you ride this massive roller coaster day to day. There's a lot of, oh, this is great, and oh, this is terrible over the course of the days. And that gets it kind of beats your soul down a little bit. And I think having that tenacity to say, after all of that, we're going to still keep trying. I think if you don't have that, you won't make it as an adoption professional in any way.
Tenacity. Is there anything about your job or field of expertise that people disagree with you about?
Oh, heck yeah.
Like what? Give me one.
Well, I mean, I think even naming, I've had people say, I very much disagree with you. I think that it's the adoptive parent's right to name their child, and professionals say that. I don't know that it's true disagreement. I think it's just, we're used to doing things how they were done because that's how they were done. And there are no training programs for adoption workers. So we're all doing the best we can. But I think really it's just a lack of, I'm an adoption nerd. I read all the time about this stuff. I love this stuff. It's really like what I eat, sleep, and breathe. And so I feel like I'm sort of like the library of adoption stuff at this point. And I know that's not normal. I know that, people have lives and jobs, and that's probably not normal. So I like to think that perspective of disagreeing on some of this is just, we haven't gotten there yet. But yeah, I'd say a lot of the things I talk about, there's people who say she's nuts. New ideas,
Describe adoption in 3 words.
Families coming together. There you go.
Families coming together and sharing resources. I love it. Kathryn Russell, thank you so much for being on the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you liked what you heard, give us a great rating, sign up for Kathryn's courses, and join us again next time. Bye-bye. Bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.